Hello and welcome to another episode of Let Us Talk. Today we have a very special guest for you guys because we have the author of the book How to Create a Vegan World, a Pragmatic Approach, and the founder or co-founder of ProVeg. Please welcome Tobias Leenaert.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
So Tobias, you advocate for a pragmatic approach, and our first question to you is, have you always been pragmatic?
No, I started as a typical animal rights activist who was very angry and who didn't understand why people couldn't go vegan right away, even if I had needed 10 years to go vegan. I couldn't understand why they couldn't do it immediately. So I know I was not always pragmatic. Yeah.
So if you were not always pragmatic, what turned you pragmatic?
So I think, first maybe we should say what pragmatism is about. And I would say if you're pragmatic, you're going to look at what works, you're going to look at effectiveness, you're going to look at what works in the context of the time and of the place you're in. And I oppose that to being idealistic in a narrow sense. And that would be about you want people to do right away whatever you want them to do for the reasons that you have. So, for instance, you would say to people, go vegan for the animals, and you have to do it now, and we have to have the vegan world tomorrow, etc. So that's a bit of a depiction of a distinction. And so I do think that people automatically will become more pragmatic if they think about reaching more people. So as long as you think look, I'm going to talk to my uncle and I'm going to maybe do some street activism, you can afford to be very idealistic. But as soon as you're, for instance, you want to reach a local government or your university department or some other institution, a business, then you have to become more pragmatic, because those other players, those other stakeholders will never spread the message in the way that you want them to spread it, ideally, right? They will not do what you would want to do them ideally. So they will do something else. They will talk about meat reduction, or they will talk about whatever suits them. If we would ask them, you have to talk to your constituents, to all university students, to all your people in your local community, you have to talk about go vegan for the animals, they may not want to do that, because it's too radical a message, it's too alienating, it's too confrontational, so they will maybe talk about reduce your meat consumption for the environment. And so if that is what is interesting to them, that is the way we should talk about it to them.
So you think that a pragmatic approach is needed to reach more people? Some animal advocates might think that this is watering down the message. What would be your response to them?
Yeah, so maybe this is also a good way to distinguish pragmatism from idealism. If you're an idealist, and also if you're an abolitionist in the narrow sense, you would have an idea of the ideal message that is not watered down. Mm-hmm. And you would say, or you would think, we have to communicate in a certain way. The way we communicate has to meet certain criteria, certain abolitionist criteria, certain criteria that are not watered down. And I would say, look, the way you communicate, what you communicate, doesn't really matter that much. What matters is what happens with that communication. So the only value of a message is how it arrives with people, what people do with it. So I see animal rights people not caring about the effect. They just care about that their message is the right one, that is orthodox and is in line with our ideology. And so they might say meat is murder, and I believe that meat is murder, and therefore I'm going to speak my truth. I'm going to say that meat is murder. But if you don't care about how that message arrives, how are you helping animals? So something I always take as a test is just imagine that you are a chicken in a cage and you are looking at the movement and you're looking at activists. What would you want them to do? You would not want them to shout for you necessarily. You would only want them to shout for you if you knew that was getting you out of that cage. You want the activists to do what gets you out of that cage forever. So that is what you have to look at. And so if the message sounds like watering down, that is no problem as long as the result is good. And I'm not saying we can always know the result, but that is at least what our attention should be on the results.
Yeah. So this pragmatism is a very necessary strategy right now with what you're seeing with other activists, for example. Are there any examples of this pragmatism already working in some way? Could you name any examples?
Well, so for instance, the idea of any message that is not talking about veganism, but is talking about reduction, or is talking about nudging, or whatever, all those techniques, they're all examples of pragmatism, of being pragmatic, of not having an idealistic ask, not asking what you ideally want to. So for instance, if you have a campaign, for instance, an organization in the US called Greener by Default, which talks about, look, let's make the default option the vegan one, and there can be meat, but the default option, the easiest option, the cheapest option maybe is vegan. So that is pragmatic in the sense that maybe this works better than introducing a vegan option where a lot of people will like scream and shout and say like, I want my meat and you have to get rid of this system, etc. So if you have a vegan option as a default, and people can still have meat even if they have to make a little bit more effort for it, or pay a little bit more for it, there might be a chance that people will complain less, and that in the end the result is better. So not ideal, I would rather see no meat at all, but I want to see it in a sustainable way so that it keeps working, and it convinces people. So that's an example.
These are incremental changes on the way to transformative change. Would you say?
Yeah. So I mean, you never have to confuse what somebody who's a pragmatist, you never have to confuse what they want to do and what they think is the best idea to go forward. You can't confuse it with their end goal. The end goal of most people, including pragmatist activists, pragmatist vegans, if such a category exists, but is abolition, just like an abolitionist wants abolition, right? So there is a very much a confusion. I mean, abolitionism is something that is described normally, I mean, like it says, to describe an end goal, right? But non-abolitionist vegans, I mean, who don't use the abolitionist vocabulary and messaging, they're abolitionists as well, in the sense that they want to abolish the animal industry as an end goal.
They just differ in strategy.
In strategy and in messaging, yes. But so you have to wonder, like the word abolitionism, what is it about? Is it about results? It should be about results. It should not be about messaging. Right? Yeah.
So actually there is no distinction between pragmatism and abolitionism, but
not in results. Yeah.
But one between pragmatism and maybe idealism and ways of methodology.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, just always look at what you're after, what the end goal is, and the end goal is the same for everybody. I mean, except for people who do believe that we can have humane meat, etc. But in generally, vegans just agree that we want abolition, and some vegans will do it in the idealistic way, and some will communicate in a more pragmatic way.
Could a pragmatic approach also work on individual level?
Yeah. Well, so I would say, first of all, maybe taking a step back, but for me, pragmatism includes being flexible in your approach. So you would do what works. And one of the approaches that may work might be a very in-your-face abolitionist approach or messaging. So you could say, for instance, like for this person, I can see that moderation for this person will not help. I know this person, this is like an all or nothing person. This is a person who, like, if they want to stop smoking, they can't, or stop drinking alcohol, they can't do it in moderation. They have to just cut. There you can say, like, look, blah, blah, blah. Or to philosophy students who are very rational, or hopefully very rational, you can say, like, look, it is wrong to end a person's life, and so no amount of meat is justified, etc. So, but you have to, like, kind of try to imagine or try to get to know or the person, or try to understand what will work for them, what arguments will work for them, and what speed will work for them, what food will work for them. So try to be flexible in that. And the typical abolitionist in a narrow sense, will always use the same approach, because that's the approach that is for them the only morally right approach. And that's what I object to think that there's only one morally right approach to or one morally right way to communicate. I think the morally right way to communicate is the way that you think works best for me. So effectiveness and rightness are almost synonymous for me.
And the effectiveness also, it really depends then on the individual with whom you talk, basically. And one idea was reductarianism, like reducing the amount of animal products people eat. And some people say, like, for example, the clinical psychologist Casey Taft, he argues that, it's only about behavior, but not really addressing the internal shift or the attitude change necessary to become vegan. What do you think about these kind of arguments?
It's good to distinguish behavior change and attitude change. And so you could have, for instance, a person who changes their behavior, who stops eating animals for instance, health reasons or because their girlfriend or boyfriend is vegan, but the attitude change hasn't happened. They haven't understood that animals can suffer and are important, can be exploited, and there may be the danger that somewhere else they're going to do some bad behavior towards animals because the attitude hasn't changed. And then much more common actually is the other way around, where there's an attitude shift. People do realize I shouldn't eat animals suffer, but they still continue to eat animals, right? So those are two different things. Now to your question, as whether there might be a behavior shift without an attitude shift, it's definitely possible. But my theory is that as soon as you have a behavior shift, as soon as you have a person who starts eating differently for health reasons, for social reasons, whatever, it's easy to see that for them, they would become more open-minded to hear the arguments about animal rights, etc., because they now realize there's nothing to lose. They already have experienced the alternative, right? So as soon as you know, look, there's an alternative, you can become more open-minded. And as long as you feel like, look, there is something that I don't want to do, there's something that I don't want to know. I always give the example of actually plants, for instance. I mean, there's a lot of meat eaters who make fun of us and who say, like, oh, what do you do with the plants? Doesn't the carrot feel pain, etc.? So
there was a study that said that tomatoes scream.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are studies, and I feel that I don't want to know what's in these studies. As long as I'm using trees, as long as I'm eating vegetables, I rather not know. So I haven't actually read anything any time in depth because I don't want to know. Because if I know that trees feel pain, I've got an extra problem. Or for instance, my smartphone, it's not like a Fairphone or something. I know there's stuff happening with bad stuff with the ingredients or the components of the phone. But it's hard for me to read about the mines in Africa or something where they get the cobalt or whatever. It's not something I'm really keen to read just because I'm using that phone. But as soon as I have a Fairphone or whatever or some
secondhand one,
then I might say like, oh, this is interesting, and I'm glad I'm not participating in that. You know.
True. So in your book and in many of your talks, you mentioned that veganism can become sort of a dogmatic ideology, like carnism, but carnism is obviously, of course, worse because it does more harm. If we don't encourage vegans to ask questions and do their own research, instead of like repeating the same points all over again, like sometimes when I do activism, I find myself repeating the same arguments, and then I think like, oh, but I'm not, like, I didn't read the study myself, or like. What do you think the dangers of this are, and what's the biggest dogma that's going around in veganism right now?
The biggest dogma is maybe in the idea of like we should always talk about veganism and always talk about the animals in our messaging, you know. So that is, I think, dogma. If you believe that there's only one way to talk about veganism, that is dogma, and I think that prevents us from improving our message and reiterating and developing things that work better than other things. And we have to keep improving because there's really a huge challenge still ahead of us.
I really like the example that you gave of what would the chicken in the cage, how would they want you to communicate?
Yeah.
I really like that question. I think that's always a good one when doing outreach yourself or talking to other people. Okay, what would the chicken want?
Yeah. Yeah, and they would especially not want us to fight among each other. You know, they would, if they would see us fighting, they would go like, "Oh my God, please!" You know. So that's the first thing we have to avoid, I think, that we are infighting and differing on all kind of like side issues and smaller things and strategies and just try to do our best. We just have to try to trust the other people who differ with us in strategy and just try to trust that they have or know that they have the same ambitions and the same aspirations and the same end goal. Yeah, that's really important.
So now we are talking about societal change, and yeah, you mention or you give even a reading recommendation at the end of your book. It's Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind, and in this book, Haidt states that moral judgment are made intuitively rather than rationally. So we make our decisions very quickly and based on different intuitions. And he also links that to political judgments. And so far, I have the impression that veganism is really quite a left-leaning movement, and we talk a lot about harm of the animals or about oppression, but we do not really talk about the conservative moral foundations and how can we address these foundations as a vegan movement.
Yeah, they're good questions. I think the general lesson from Haidt's moral foundations theory, which is open to some criticism, as I understand, but the main lesson there is different people have different ways to anchor their moral judgments. There's different values under it. Like for the one, it's justice. For the other one, it's loyalty. For instance, I mean, a very clear example is, let's say you're in a car accident with a friend who was the driver, and you know it's your friend's fault, and the police interrogates you. Will you be emphasizing the truth and fairness, or will you be loyal to your friend? And so, yeah, it is, I think, clear that conservative people sometimes have different values, and the question is to what extent and how can we cater to them. I do think that the vegan movement is so far left that we are turning off people on the more conservative end of the spectrum, with associating veganism with all kinds of intersectional issues. And for instance, another example is that the climate movement has very clearly taken the side of Palestine, which turns off other people who don't share that opinion. So the question is it smart to associate something you fight for with a lot of other causes? The movements who have won in the history are the movements who have stuck to their own core business. It becomes confusing if you on the one hand have climate messages and on the other hand you have Palestine messages, etc. So it's confusing to see what is this organization or this march about. And secondly, of course, you're going to turn off the people from climate if they don't agree with your Israel-Palestine opinion, right? So I was recently talking with some people who want to work on the Belgian Party for the Animals, and they told me they have a very, very long political program. And every time somebody asks, like, what do you think of this? I want to know as a voter, what do you think on this topic? Every time somebody asks that, they will draft some opinion about it. Yeah. But you open yourself up to a lot of discussions, to a lot of work, to a lot of turning off people. Yeah. So I think it's smarter in some cases, like if you're a small political animal party, to say, this is our core business. Please trust that we are people who want the good for everybody, and we're not going to express an opinion on this. As much as we care about it, we're not going to express opinion, and we're going to stick to our.
No, I think I agree with that, because this issue is, I think, why Extinction Rebellion isn't doing really well at the moment, because they're just mixing everything together, and it leads to unclarity, and it's just, I don't think it's effective.
Yeah, I mean, every single topic that you include as a topic of discussion is a potential cause for more fighting, for more infighting, for more differing among yourselves, etc. And we have a culture, or we are beings that have a lot of problems with disagreement. You know, we can, if you say Israel and I say Palestine, if you say COVID is a hoax and I say it's not, then we have a problem. Maybe sometimes not. Maybe we can agree, like you say yes abortion, I say no abortion. Maybe on that we can agree, but on another thing we can't. But there will inevitably be things that are so sensitive and that we feel so strongly about that we will fight and we will stop collaborating because we differ. And so as long as it's like that, as long as we can't learn how to disagree, and how to have different opinions, then sometimes it's better to have no opinions or to avoid the discussions, I think, if we want to achieve something.
Yeah, the thing is, like, the amount of vegans is already so small.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be excluding like that amount of people from even participating.
Exactly, yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, you can argue, of course, that like a person who is on the extreme right, I mean, even then, I mean, you could say like they're still welcome because we hope to influence them into a better direction, but at least they cannot wear T-shirts like that when they're participating in something or whatever. I mean, I always think that like the people that whose opinions we really despise, I still think it's better to be in touch with them than to isolate them, because how are they going to change if we isolate them? You know, you can't alienate somebody into joining your team. You know, so you have to remain in touch and hope that because of the contact, there will be, hopefully you will not change, but they will change. Otherwise, the only option is to let them be with their own crowd and let them reinforce each other and be even further away from them. So
yeah. Because with different activist organizations have different rules around this. Like, if you look at Anonymous for the Voiceless, they don't allow anyone who's not vegan to participate in their activism. Yeah. Whereas I think the Animal Safe Movement does, or at least people, I don't know what exactly the rule is, maybe people who are transitioning still or like going in that direction or wanting to go that direction. Like, I found myself thinking about that, and it's like, could someone who is not vegan themselves or wanting to be vegan themselves be an effective activist in outreach settings?
Yeah, there's a lot of things to say on it. I mean, first of all, if you would talk about, like, for instance, Anonymous for the Voiceless, there it's always about the animals, and when you think about the animals, you will mostly be vegan. Our messages, they will always sound like as if we have this vegan agenda, which we do have. If we talk about the environment, about animal welfare, about health, they will always say, yeah, but you want the whole world to go vegan, and which is true. Ricky Gervais was an example that people were angry with because he wasn't vegan, but apparently he's been vegan for a couple of years, but didn't come out for being a vegan. So that maybe was on purpose, and that maybe was strategic, you know, like as long as he said he wasn't, he didn't say he was vegan, maybe more people were less listening to him. Maybe now he's creating more polarization because he said he's vegan. I mean, I'm glad he's vegan. I'm glad he said it, but there might be downsides to it.
It's funny that you asked this question because I did animal advocacy before I became vegan, actually. I had my petition at the University of Twente for more vegan food before I was fully vegan.
I didn't know that.
And I also was at Anonymous for the Voiceless before I was fully vegan.
Oh, nobody knew that. And
no, then it was also back in Amsterdam. Yeah. But it's actually something that turned me vegan because I was surrounded by vegans. And
exactly.
Then I felt like,
That's a really good point.
So I think that works for a lot of people. If you have the social environment, let the people join the activism and they will become vegan. Don't exclude them beforehand. It's very obvious.
Yeah, and it's so obvious that we need a much bigger movement. And if we're gonna only rely on the 1% of vegans, we're gonna just remain a very small movement. So I think one of the best examples of big mobilized movement is the Party for the Animals in the Netherlands here. I mean, they're not all vegan by a long shot. But they have thousands and thousands of members, and they represented at any level of government. No one in the world has done that. I think it's a very successful movement, and we have to. I think we have to accept and invite everyone who looks in the same direction. And the Vegan Society in 1944 was actually founded with the idea of anybody can join, no matter how they eat, if they agree with the direction. You know, and there's many people who say like yeah, I agree we should abolish at least intensive factory farming, but maybe animal farming in general, but they're not yet vegan. I don't think it's a good idea to exclude them because they don't practice what they preach yet, because they might do very interesting things for this movement. I think we know this from research that there's many more people who would agree with any law proposition to abolish slaughterhouses that there are vegans. There's a couple of dozens of percentages agreeing with the idea of abolishing slaughterhouses, but there's only 1% vegans. So I think this is a bit like this, like I wouldn't want to be, let's say like taxes. I wouldn't want to be the only sucker who pays more taxes if nobody else does. But as soon as government says like we're going to increase the taxes for developing countries, you know, we're gonna increase them for everybody, then I would say, look, I go along. I'll pay gladly, but I'm not going to be the only one. So this is like many people might say, look, if you want to abolish meat and I can't eat anymore, I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to like try to sabotage you. I'm not going to protest. I'll go along. I can't do it voluntarily right now, but I'll go along when I have to.
I just looked up the survey that was done last year about how many Dutch people think that factory farming should be abolished, or intensive farming, and it was 40% that said yes and 20% that are sort of in agreement. So that's like 60% who basically
Yeah.
I mean, that's
like
about
on.
factory farming, not farming in general, right?
it's the bio industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could compare it with the number of people who eats meat from the bio industry, and
It's a huge percentage
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and still it always comes back to talking about individuals. I think especially the vegan movement is so exclusive about people who are not 100% vegan, or like also people themselves. I also ask people for my own research, what do you think about animal rights? Or like, should animals have rights? Something like that. And people said, I would like to say that animals have rights, but I eat meat myself, so I do not dare to say that.
Yeah.
And I mean, also you have it a lot about the climate movement, that
Yeah.
people, you cannot be in favor of climate measures if you go yourself on vacation by plane. That people are so obsessed with purity and consistency that, there's no separation anymore between the moral individual behavior and the political stance you can take. And how can we escape that?
So this is to some extent also the responsibility of vegans, to not accuse them of hypocrisy when they do that, maybe, so that they feel safer to say, like, look, I'm sorry, I eat it, but I'm actually not liking it, or actually I would be in favor of this or that. So I think one solution would be, I mean, we do get accused by meat eaters of being inconsistent, or they look for inconsistencies. Maybe they would do less of that if we ourselves did not pretend to be consistent. You know, if we said, like, look, we're just doing the best that we can, and we realize that veganism is some kind of like line. It's a good line, but to some extent it's also an arbitrary line, you know, and we could do more, and we could do more in other fields. If we admitted that we're not perfect, that we're not meeting some kind of like really golden standard or something, then I think that other people might be more forgiving towards us, might not want to look for those exceptions in us, and might also maybe be more appreciative of like mistakes, and might be more lenient to try something themselves.
About talking to others, I would like to link back to moral foundation theory that we discussed earlier, because also I think we always use the same arguments. Again, empathy or oppression, it's like a term that I hear very often. But something that might attract also another group of people is like the emotion of disgust that a lot of people have.
Yeah.
And I think that's currently very much underexploited by our movement. Do you have any ideas how to make use of disgusts in an effective advocacy manner?
Yeah, I had the idea of like trying to spread the idea that when organizations, undercover organizations go into factory farms and slaughterhouses and things like that, that rather than, or aside from documenting instances of cruelty, they could also document instances of stuff that is disgusting.
Like shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Everywhere on the
whatever
floor.
they see that is disgusting,
Yeah.
make a nice compilation of that and spread that through the media, etc. And we do know that the most some of the most effective things happen because of the idea of like, this is too disgusting to eat, or this is too disgusting to feed to our children. There was some investigation, I think, in the US sometime, and it was about meat that went to school lunches, and there were hundreds of thousands of tons of meat were recalled, which is a lot of economical damage. And as far as it's true, I think that those are arguments that could be useful. Sometimes I see the vegan movement exaggerate them.
I think that non-vegans already use disgust when describing like vegan products.
Exactly.
When it comes to like chemicals, oh no,
Yeah.
or like this is sludge or whatever. Like so they use that same emotion. But if we could like mirror it back
Yeah.
to them, that could be effective.
Yeah, I think one very obvious source of disgust is also just the sheer amount of blood happening in slaughter.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think a slaughterhouse is just a disgusting horror place, and that's also for non-vegans.
Yeah.
No one likes to be there. Even the people who work there don't like to be there.
Yeah, and then
Especially those.
there's of course a matter of moral disgust. Of course, if you show images, gruesome images, there's a moral disgust reaction. You know, you don't want to see that, but that's exactly the pictures that people try to avoid. And maybe it's not always a good idea to show them either for us, but those are the pictures that people are protected from. Basically, they're not seeing those images very often, and they will try to avoid seeing them because they are morally or otherwise disgusting.
So we're speaking to you as a couple of students here, basically. This is a podcast made by students, for students mostly, but for everyone. And we were wondering, like, what you think is the most effective that we can do as students right now.
Yeah, so I do think that there is a possibility to push for institutional change at the university with plant-based universities, that campaign, for instance, or with veggie challenge teams, stuff like that. I think that with your organization, a Vegan Student Association, you can also, I think it's important to really communicate in a way there that brings together many more people than just the vegans at your organization. So you could talk about environment and animal welfare. It's like not just have vegan publics, but bring the people together who are in some way interested in one of these topics, and so create a bigger group and emphasize also that they don't have to be vegan to be an activist or to do something or to be an ally or whatever. I mean, I've seen examples of universities where the cafeteria has been really transformed into something not necessarily vegan, but with a lot more options, and there's a lot to play with. There's a lot to explore and see, like, can we abolish this option? Can we make this more expensive? And sit together with the people who decide on these things. I don't know who it is here, but if you talk about these things reasonably and rationally, I think there's a lot possible, and I think that universities can be some kind of driving force behind the change, because students are progressive and they are breeding the next generation of professionals, and so it's quite important to be active here.
Yeah, so we are starting up a plant-based universities campaign
Okay,
here
great.
and at multiple universities around the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And we will, in a couple of months, we will launch nationally.
All right.
At the same time. So that's
Yeah.
a very exciting development that we're doing. Yeah.
Great.
Also, we're of course open to non-vegans. We do a lot of stuff with other associations.
Yeah. When I started an organization in Belgium, initially, the first few months, we started as an organization that was going to attack every injustice. And we soon found out that we weren't enough people for that, and then we stuck to just animals and veganism. It's just a matter of priorities. With the limited resources, you're going to decide we're about animals and we're going to help them. And there's all the more reason to do so and to have that focus, because animals are so ignored. They're so massively mistreated and they're so ignored. You know, there's so little means to them. So we are very justified to say, our focus is going to be animals. In the US, the number that I have in my head, and it probably hasn't changed, is 1.5% of donations goes to animal causes. And of those 1.5%, 99% goes to cats and dogs and shelters. So it's basically
1% of 1%.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh my God.
And it's a lot more farm animals in the world than companion
Yeah,
animals.
yeah. So these are US numbers, so they apply to 10 billion animals per year. So they get 0.015% of donations. So that's all the more reason, like I said, to feel justified that some people can say this is our priority.
With our VSA, or with all VSAs, basically, we launched a fundraiser for ProVeg because it's giving season now. And yeah, do you think that donations are an underestimated way of doing good? I feel like there's not so much talk about donations.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, some people don't have time, but they do have some money. Of course, in the case of students, it's more a matter of they have some time and energy, but they don't have money. So that's maybe why you don't hear so much about it. Even though, of course, I guess the average student here would be in a very privileged position compared to the general world population, you know. So there's always something that you can't share. But I do understand that it's less comfortable than when you're maybe 45 years old and you have an income, etc.
Yeah, besides of our studies, we also perform different sorts of activism. Some of us do Cubes of Truth or Safe Squares. We do with We the Free. We have the a video challenge with VR glasses. What's your stance on these kind of outreach actions?
I always give the advice like to see if it can be combined with something in terms of food. You know, like if you can give a voucher, a coupon to go to like to the people and say like, look, you can I have a burger there with a 20% discount or something, like maybe work together with a local business, because then you combine the arguments and the behavior change. So
with We the Free, we do give out food as a prize after they watch the video.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah. So I also think that I mean, some people don't have time or the capacity to do more complicated work than standing in the street. So I think it might be very useful for certain people, or might be the only thing that they have the opportunity to do. It can also be a very good way to practice your skills of talking to people. It's definitely a good way to recruit more people into the movement and more volunteers, because it is I think it stimulates people to, or it is people get motivated to do that, and when they see other people doing that, they might say, I want to join this movement, and then from there they can move to more effective or different interventions or whatever. I think that like, obviously, and this is what we see within effective altruism as well, the most important decision you can make is your career decision in terms of doing good. So the people listening and you as well, think about what you can do right now for your future career to make that a more effective career for animals. And also make a decision, maybe for some of you, like make a decision just that is your thing, that you will go to this, that you will go for this, for the animals. You know, like, I mean, there's many causes and there's many worthwhile causes, but like I said, there's many, I mean, the damage, the horror that we do to animals is incredibly big. There's very little attention going to it, very little money going to it. So it's really good if some people decide like, okay, this is my thing. I'm going to devote at least 5 or 10 years of my life to it. And I'm going to choose a career path that can help them in no matter what field they are in. And some fields are more obvious than others. But to say that like, this is going to be where I'm going to make my mark, my difference.
I just started thinking about myself personally. Like, because I'm currently in my 3rd year of university, and people ask me the question, like, what do you want to do later? And the more I think about it, the more I want to do activism full time and dedicate my life to this. I don't know if it would be sustainable or if I have the skills to be in a paid position for certain organizations or not. So it's just something that I think about currently.
It's good that you're thinking about it, and there's always the risk left. But like, I mean, you're very motivated now, but if you don't find anything, and then maybe some boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever comes along and they want a baby with you or whatever, and there's all kind of things may happen, and then you get off track. And then maybe we meet if I'm alive in 30 years, and we meet and you have a normal career and you have a family and you may be donating 50 euros a year or something, but that's it. And that's a risk, and that will happen to many people who are motivated right now, who will just like slide off to... I have seen so many people, like I found an organization 25 years ago, and there's people who were with me back then, who now are, I mean, they're good people, and they're still vegan in the best case, sometimes not, or they have made children who they're not bringing up as vegans. So a lot of times people just get sidetracked. Life happens, basically. So there should be like a bit of a way to guard against that, you know, like to maybe make a commitment to yourself, like say like, I'm gonna really watch out that I stay on track, and that even if I can't find a job, I'm still gonna do this or that. I'm gonna commit to 10% donation, or I'm gonna commit to keep trying to find something, or whatever. Some pledge, maybe, to like, I will be on the side of the animals, and I will, do my best for for the rest of my life.
Now you made your career out of activism. How did that journey? How did you experience that?
Yeah, it was. It was mainly dedication and motivation, and I also understand that this is something you can't control. Like, you cannot push a button to increase your motivation, not easily. I mean, you can do some things, but basically, it's like, I mean, I always say like to people in my talks who are activists, like, be grateful for the fact that, like, if you have a mission in life, if you feel you have this fire in life or something, be grateful for that, because most people don't have that, and it's something that's given to you from I don't know where, but you can't force it. You cannot say like, look, from now on I'm going to have a mission. It's just something that comes, like belief or like religion or whatever, you know, it arrives with you. And so I was lucky in a way to have that, even if it doesn't always make life more easy. Sometimes it does. And so I followed that. And I got, I had to go through, I think maybe 5 years of normal jobs. This was 2020, so there weren't, I mean, today there's so many more possibilities in terms of funding and support and entrepreneurship, etc. But back then, there was nothing in this field. So you had to create it yourself. And so for 5 years, I did the normal job. And on that job, I did a lot of stuff for my organization without the people of my job knowing. I spent 2/3, 3/4 of my time on my non-profit while I was paid for it at the job. So that's also a possibility. You can find a job that, like, you don't have to do much. I got the possibility to devote myself full time to this organization. Then I got out of the organization because I was feeling I wasn't the best person to lead an organization or to manage a team. And then I became more self-employed, writing and speaking and consulting. And that's where I am now. So it's been 25 years now.
Yeah, that's a little bit about what we can do and where we see our future careers maybe. And talking about the future, well, what is your vision for the future actually? Are you optimistic?
On my best days, I'm optimistic. I do think that we will get there. We will get to a phase where we will look back and wonder, like, how was it possible that we did what we did? Just like we're still writing essays and PhDs about how was the Holocaust possible. How could these people do what they did knowing what happened? The same way we will say, like, okay, people knew that animals felt pain. They knew that they were all locked up in these big stables by the millions. How did they let it happen? I think that's what we will ask in the future. Maybe you will live to see it. The end of it's quite possible. I think that at some point it's going to be very fast, and we're going to wonder, like, how was it possible? Why was it so obvious before?
I think ChatGPT said like 2075.
Yeah.
2075.
Yeah. It sounds like it could be possible.
About reaching Veganville. What do you think of the role of cultivated meat, precision fermentation or biomass fermentation, and also plant-based proteins in this vegan?
Yeah, I think they're all. I mean, the new technologies are very important in the sense that they can bring about a technological revolution that can induce a moral revolution. So first a technological one, then a moral one. I think that is very well possible. So we should invest. We should be open to the possibilities of these technologies, even though they might fail, and even though we might not need them in the end. I don't know, but at this point, it seems like a good idea to invest in them. I think that they might create some shift in people, in the sense that, like, people would say that, okay, this is real meat. For me, this is now real meat. It comes from animals. It's animal cells. It's real. So hopefully something like that.
I hope that it will happen. That I like the idea that technology comes and it changes our whole notion of meat. That at one point we will say, hey, we have meat, and then that's maybe cell-based or plant-based or whatever. Yeah. And then we will look back at slaughter-based meat and be like, oh, what is that? Like, that gets the extra name. Like, or for example, milk. If we say milk, we don't even think of mother's milk, we think of dairy. And maybe then precision fermentation-based milk will be the standard milk. And then we will talk about cow-based milk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will become like primitive
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah, primitive and shameful, and yeah.
Talking about ChatGPT, artificial intelligence is like a very penetrating technology right now that is almost everywhere and everybody's talking about it. And it's basically has the potential to revolutionize the way we live. But also algorithms are biased based on the biases we have in our current society, such as classism, racism, sexism, but also speciesism. Yeah, do you think that this might be a problem?
There definitely can be a problem, although I'm quite surprised at how progressive ChatGPT is at this moment. You know, I mean, it's certainly biased, and our biases are in there. But ask your general people on the right side of the spectrum what they think of ChatGPT, and they will think it's a very woke. It will definitely be great, and we have to try to influence people to try to put some anti-speciesist stuff in there, which will make it even more woke in the eyes of some people. But yeah, it is a chance to form the language of this technology in the direction of it taking into account all sentient beings, basically.
Yeah, we had it in an activist group that someone, like, I think it was Apple, who actually automatically labels pictures, and she was an activist at a pig safe, and she took a photo of the pig, and then the AI labeled this as dinner or fine dining.
Really? Yeah. There was I don't know if you saw it. Somebody who posted, I reposted it. Something like, "Tell me how to force feed a duck," and the ChatGPT says, "I will certainly not tell you that because it's cruel." And then you ask, "Give me a foie gras recipe." It has no problem offering you a foie gras recipe. So this whole contradiction. It's just very human.
So thank you for being here, Tobias. We have a final question for you. It's kind of related to effective communication, what we talked about before. What's your advice for celebrating Christmas with non-vegan family and friends?
Get close to somebody who has COVID so you can avoid going to Christmas.
Or pretend to be sick.
I mean, that's one option. I mean, you can try to avoid going there if you really hate it, but of course that's a missed opportunity for having some discussions. I think that you could try, and I think after all these years now we're going to have the first vegan Christmas in my girlfriend's family. My family is always vegan Christmas, but my family now is going to be vegan for everybody now too. It used to be only for us, me and my girlfriend, but not for the rest of the family. That's going to be for everybody. So people might be open to do it. The people who are cooking. So it's worth discussing. You could also, just of course bring your own stuff and make it look good, make sure it looks good, and not discuss it and have just a peaceful experience. I think it really depends on what person you are and what you're in the mood for. If you want to stir up some shit at Christmas, it's possible, but it's also possible to just that night ignore it. I do understand I find something very disturbing in the fact that, like, you're celebrating, there's a celebration, and at the same time there's this mass cruelty on a scale like even bigger than on the other days. So that's very disturbing to me. So I really often want to say something about that. That's also something you could do. If you feel you have to say something about it, you might do something else rather than raise it at Christmas. But I don't think there's any one answer for everybody. You have to kind of feel what you're in the mood for, I think.
I feel like family is always the end boss. Like, I know so many activists who do street outreach, but for them always family is the hardest. Now you say you're doing it for even professionally, and your first advice about talking to our families was getting COVID. It seems like such a difficult topic to reach the family with this. Of course, also, you have to find a balance between, like, talking about a very uncomfortable topic and also, leaving it aside, but feeling the discomfort because of all the cruelty involved. Is there like a common ground? Is there like a like a middle way in which we can talk about it, and like in a very respectful way that it works?
Yeah, I mean, it also depends on like what kind of family members you have. Some people have progressive, open-minded family members who might have a good conversation about this, and other people have like this old conservative uncle who just can't say anything useful about it, you know. And there you have to wonder, like, is this a good use of my time and energy? I don't think so. But I mean, there's this with family. There's this contrast between, on the one hand, they have a big impact on your life and your well-being if they're close to you, but on the other hand, in the larger picture, it's not so effective to focus on them. You know, so for effectiveness reasons, you wouldn't focus on them, but for your own well-being, you would, and your own comfort, you would. So you have to kind of like balance that out and see what's most important for you, I think.
That's what I'm doing this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the first Christmas I'm not spending with my parents, because last year it didn't go very well, because last year I wanted to do the strategy of like, don't bring it up, don't talk about it, just sit there, try to enjoy it as much as you can, even though there's corpses on the table. But then my family brought it up themselves, basically. So they started mocking me
Really?
in a subtle way, like, oh, there's dead animals on the table, Christina wouldn't like that.
Yeah.
And like those comments, and that fired me up, and then we started a discussion.
Yeah.
And then, like, after this discussion was over, they blamed me for starting it.
Okay.
Right. So
Yeah.
this gaslighting happens by my
Yeah.
parents very often, and
That's
so
right.
I had several reasons not to want to spend Christmas with them. But on the second day of Christmas this year, I am spending it with my grandma and my aunt, both of who are a bit more like understanding towards my perspective, and they agreed to let me cook a fully vegan dinner for them,
Yes.
3 courses. So I'm excited for that. But
Yeah.
I'm stepping away from my direct, like, close family.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, maybe it teaches them a lesson. You never know, you know, like for next year. I think you shouldn't, nobody should take that like abuse, even though those people have no idea what they're doing. You know, we still shouldn't accept it, because, I mean, it's bad enough what happens to these animals. It's an extra step if then we are being blamed and ridiculed for trying to make it better, or caring about it. I think if people are fed up with the way they're being treated, and they don't feel like bringing it up and having a fight or trying to influence them, then it's better to just withdraw and have Christmas in an atmosphere with people who do appreciate what you're doing, and it could be family, or they could be friends who are vegan, or whatever.
I think you found a very good solution by cooking vegan dishes for people who are open to veganism. I'm very lucky with my family. My family is also, they're not vegan or vegetarian, but they're just very open and supportive. And we will also cook, we have some mixed meals where everybody eats what they like. I eat vegan and they don't. But we have also always one day where everybody eats something that I can decide, so it's vegan. And then there's always an opportunity to show them, hey, it's nice. So thank you very much, Tobias, for being here with us. For me, it was a very great episode, very insightful, lots of information to digest.
Thanks for having me here.
Is there anything you would like to leave us with?
No, I just would say, like, for the people, just repeat for the people who are in the position to do something, to not underestimate the size of the problem, and also not underestimate the things that they can potentially do in their lives to speed up the finding of a solution for that problem.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So much.